It began with a gentle tap, almost timid in its restraint. I had been gazing through the window into the evening shadows when his voice broke through my thoughts. Could I just have an embrace? I turned, taken aback. His complexion was reddened, eyes shimmering with something delicate in his expression I'd never witnessed before. I extended my arms thinking it was merely a need for reassurance, but when his embrace enfolded me, I didn't experience solace. I felt warmth, quietness, a moment that lingered too long, and in that space something unvoiced passed between us, something neither of us could retract. The evening had been peaceful, unremarkable, or so I believed. I'd completed my standard routine, straightening the family room, switching off the corridor lights, verifying the rear entrance was secured. The quietness was soothing, the kind that emerges when the external world slumbers and only the gentle whisper of recollections fills the space. I'd been adapting to this unfamiliar normality, the absence of a companion, the resonance of footsteps once shared, and the burden of an unspoken isolation. Then came the tap on my bedroom door. It startled me. He never knocked. My stepson had always maintained distance, respectful, reserved, even when I wished for more openness. But tonight his knock was different, hesitant, as though he lingered outside debating whether to interrupt me. I opened the door anticipating a casual request, perhaps for washing detergent or something similar. Instead, I found him standing there, barefoot in loose pants and a weathered shirt, his eyes weary but inviting. I experienced a difficult day, he said, his tone hushed, almost embarrassed. Could I have an embrace? It was innocent, even endearing, a simple instance of vulnerability from someone who rarely allowed himself to be exposed that way. I nodded instinctively and moved forward to encircle him with my arms. What surprised me most was how long he held on, his arms tightening slightly more than I'd anticipated, as if drawing something from me he'd needed for far too long. And I permitted it because in that moment, I needed it too. I could sense his breath against my neck, gentle and measured. He carried a faint scent of shampoo and fresh laundry. There was nothing inappropriate about it, not remotely. It was simply heavy with the kind of intimacy that occurs when two individuals who have shared space for years finally lower their emotional barriers. I had raised him, not from infancy but from the moment he entered my life. I'd always tried to be a stable presence for him after the separation. He had remained with me, not with his father. Over time, the distinctions between us had blurred, not in actions but in our connection. We had become each other's solace, though we'd never articulated it aloud until now. In that unexpected silence, our bodies communicated more than words ever could. He withdrew slightly, enough to look into my eyes. His expression was unreadable, not confused, not frightened, but curious, even tender. I couldn't find words. I searched for maternal wisdom, some gentle reminder of the boundaries that existed for a reason. But before I could speak, he whispered, "It's been so long since anyone held me like that." And in that moment, my heart fractured, not because it was inappropriate, but because I understood. I knew precisely what he meant. I had experienced that same emptiness, the months, even years of being invisible, untouched, unacknowledged. The kind of solitude that quietly accumulates until it erupts in unexpected ways. I invited him to sit on the edge of my bed, thinking he might open up, perhaps discuss what had made his day so challenging. He sat near but not too close. There was a pause, a moment where you recognize the next few seconds will matter, and they did, because instead of discussing his day, he asked softly, "Why didn't you ever find someone new?" The question caught me unprepared. It wasn't what I had expected. I looked down, uncertain how to respond. "I suppose I just stopped searching," I said. "And perhaps I was afraid of being wounded again." He nodded slowly, thoughtfully. "You don't deserve to feel alone," he added, his voice carrying a sincerity that seemed much older than his years. I turned to look at him, and in that gaze I saw something I hadn't noticed before, not just appreciation but something deeper, more emotionally layered. It wasn't affection in a romantic sense, not yet, but a kind of connection that pleaded to be acknowledged, to be felt. Still, I wasn't certain where it would lead. I hesitated. I stood, walked to the window, stared at the night beyond the glass. The room was dim, only the small lamp by my bedside offering illumination. I heard him rise too, his footsteps soft on the carpet. I'm sorry, he said from behind. I did not intend to make things awkward. You did not, I replied, turning slightly. You just reminded me of something I forgot. That I am still a woman, that I still feel. He moved closer. So do I, he said. And I don't know what this is, but I haven't felt this safe with anyone in a long time. My chest tightened, my thoughts racing. The boundaries were trembling now, not crossed, but shaking under the weight of possibility. And I knew that if I allowed this moment to continue, it would lead to a place I had never imagined, a place I'd once promised myself I would never go. But I also knew something else, that life, with all its disorder, had brought us both here, not by accident, but perhaps by some strange twist of fate that neither of us could fully comprehend. I sat back down. He joined me, this time closer than before, our knees almost touching. The room felt heavy with something unsaid, but known and wanted. My hand rested near his, and I did not move it when he brushed against it, his presence just inches from mine, our silence louder than any words could be. I kept telling myself this was just a moment of vulnerability, a crack in the wall that had held strong for so long. But the longer we stayed there, side by side, not touching but connected by something invisible, the more difficult it became to deceive myself. I was not immune, not to the ache, not to the warmth, not to him. He looked at me again, and there was a gentleness in his eyes that took my breath. It was not the kind of look a son gives to a motherly figure. It was something else, a quiet admiration, a question he was too afraid to voice. My instinct screamed to rise, to break the tension, to walk to the kitchen and distract myself with dishes or noise. But my body remained still, my hand still near his, still slightly brushing against him. It was gentle contact, but it felt like fire beneath my skin. When he finally spoke again, his voice was low. Have you ever felt something that made no sense, but still felt right? I swallowed hard. Yes, I whispered without even realizing I had said it. I had. I was feeling it now. He leaned back slightly, giving me space, as if to show he was not pressuring me, not trying to cross a boundary I had not already invited. But it was there. The moment was sitting between us, breathing heavily and waiting for one of us to either end it or embrace it. I felt his eyes searching mine, gently, cautiously, as if asking for permission, not to touch me, but to understand me. I had spent so long denying myself the right to feel, to be seen, to be wanted, and now that it was here, staring at me with such honesty, I did not know what to do. I turned toward him slowly, my knees facing his, and for a few seconds we just looked at each other, no words, just two souls realizing they had wandered into unfamiliar territory. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face. I did not stop him. My breathing changed, deepened. I could feel my heart beating against my ribs. I closed my eyes, trying to resist the wave of emotion flooding my chest. But when I opened them again, he was still there, still waiting, still asking with his eyes. Then, in the quietest of movements, I reached for his hand. It was warm, trembling. A little. I held it for a moment before placing it gently on my leg, not for seduction, not for permission, but for connection. The honesty of the gesture undid us both. He leaned forward, his forehead resting gently against mine. I could feel the vulnerability pouring from him. I don't want to ruin anything, he whispered. I need to feel close to someone, and right now I can't think of anyone else who sees me the way you do. I felt tears gather in my eyes, not from confusion but from recognition. I had spent years being strong for everyone else. I had held families together, wiped away tears, put others before myself, and now someone was holding space for me. I did not care how wrong it looked from the outside. All I knew was that inside this moment, I felt real. Our lips met, not hungrily, not recklessly, but like two puzzle pieces fitting into place. The kiss was gentle, exploratory, filled with a kind of reverence that made my skin hum. He pulled back first, his eyes scanning mine. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded slowly, my thumb brushing along his jaw. "Yes, I never thought I would feel this again, not like this." He kissed me again, this time deeper, more certain, and my hands found his shoulders, holding him like he might vanish if I let go. Our bodies leaned into one another, hesitant but willing. Each movement felt deliberate, the slow undoing of fear, the cautious exploration of a boundary neither of us had planned to cross. We were not rushing. It was not about desire. It was about finally being allowed to feel. As we lay back on the bed, the room seemed to blur around us. His hands were respectful but curious, tracing the outline of my waist, then pausing as if waiting for affirmation. I nodded, my body responding in kind, every nerve alive with sensation. He kissed down the curve of my neck, breathing me in as if memorizing every inch. I exhaled a shaky breath, closing my eyes and letting myself fall into the warmth of it all. The way he touched me was tender, like he knew how long it had been since someone treated me like I mattered. Our clothes came off slowly, carefully folded into the moment rather than ripped away by passion. He looked at me, all of me, without judgment or hesitation. "You are beautiful," he said, his voice cracking slightly. I wanted to laugh, to deflect, to say something self-deprecating, but I stopped myself. For once, I accepted the compliment without resistance. Our bodies met fully, and time seemed to stop. Every movement was a conversation, a slow emotional unfolding. He moved with care, always watching me, making sure I was with him in every breath. I had never felt so simultaneously exposed and safe. Every touch, every sigh, every shift of weight was filled with intention. I clung to him, not out of desperation, but out of finally understanding what intimacy could feel like when it came from truth instead of obligation. We lay there afterward, tangled in silence, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the thump of his heart. "Was that wrong?" he asked softly, almost like a child afraid of the answer. I took a moment before responding. "Maybe it was unexpected, but it did not feel wrong." He kissed the top of my head. "I don't want this to be a mistake." "Then it doesn't have to be," I replied, unsure of what that would mean tomorrow or next week or next year, but absolutely certain of one thing. Tonight was not a mistake. We stayed like that for a while, skin against skin, heat sinking in the quiet aftermath of something neither of us had the words to define. It had not been planned, it had not been sought, but it had been real, and in that reality, I found something I had lost a long time ago, a piece of myself I thought had disappeared with the last kiss of a failed marriage. But it had not. It had just been waiting for the right moment, the right touch, the right connection, however unthinkable it may have seemed. The morning after carried a silence I was not ready for. The soft light coming through the blinds did little to warm the chill in my chest. He was still asleep, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that felt too peaceful compared to the storm quietly brewing in my head. I stared at the ceiling, unmoving, caught between the comfort of his body beside me and the chaos of what we had crossed into. There was no denying the tenderness of the night, no denying that every kiss, every touch had felt healing, but now, in the sobering light of day, the weight of consequence began to settle like dust in my lungs. I slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake him, not because I regretted anything, but because I needed space to think. My reflection in the mirror stopped me. There was a softness in my eyes, a vulnerability that had not been there in years. Yet beneath that softness was fear of judgment, fear of misunderstanding, fear that this moment of closeness could become a scar rather than a balm. I sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold on to what little clarity I could find. I had always been the caretaker, the protector, the strong one. I was the woman who never faltered, who picked up the pieces, who did what was expected without complaint. But now I'd let someone in, someone who had looked at me not as a figure of responsibility but as a woman, and that somehow had unraveled all the roles I'd built for myself. He stirred behind me, a soft groan escaping his lips as he reached for me instinctively. His arm wrapped around my waist, and his face pressed against my back. "You left the bed," he mumbled, still half asleep. "Are you okay?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say everything was fine, but the words stuck in my throat. "I just needed a minute," I replied, my voice barely audible. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, and when he looked at me, there was no guilt in his gaze, only concern. "That made it harder. Do you regret it?" he asked gently. I turned to face him, unsure how to answer. "No," I said after a long pause, "but I am scared of what it means." His face fell slightly, not out of shame but out of empathy. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said. "I know last night was more than just comfort." "I felt it too," I nodded, my eyes welling up. "It is not just about what we felt. It is about what comes after, about how we face it, how we explain it, if we even can." He reached for my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. "Then let's not explain it right now. Let's just feel it. Let's just sit in it for a moment before the world comes in and tells us how wrong it is." The truth of his words hit me harder than I expected. Why was I already anticipating shame before we had even had a chance to breathe? Why was I preparing for regret when nothing about last night had felt forced or dirty? The intimacy we had shared had not been impulsive. It had been slow, honest, filled with pauses and permission. It had been about being seen. And yet, the world outside this room would never understand that. They would reduce it to labels. They would make it ugly. That thought made my chest tighten again. I stood and moved to the window, pulling the curtain back slightly. The street below was quiet, unaware. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, and somewhere in the background, I could hear the soft whir of a neighbor's lawnmower. Life was still moving, indifferent to our night, to our confusion. "What are we now?" I asked quietly. "You and me?" He did not answer immediately. He stood and walked over, standing behind me. His hands rested on my shoulders. "We are still us," he said, but now maybe with more truth than before. I turned to look at him, my voice trembling. "But truth can be heavy," he nodded. "Then let's carry it together." It was strange how those simple words calmed something in me. I had been expecting him to run, to panic, to dismiss the night as a mistake born of weakness. But he did none of that. Instead, he held space for my fear, acknowledged it without trying to erase it, and that, more than anything, made me want to believe this could be something more than a moment lost in time, that it could mean something deeper, something worth holding on to, even if it defied reason. Still, the weight of reality was creeping in. There would be questions. There would be consequences. But for now, all I had was this room, this morning light, and the man who had asked for nothing more than an embrace and ended up opening a door I did not know I had locked so tightly. My heart was still uncertain, but it was no longer frozen. That alone felt like the beginning of something worth exploring, even if the world was not ready for it. In the days that followed, we moved through the house more gently, like two people who had touched something sacred and did not want to bruise it. We did not rush into explanations or decisions. Instead, we allowed silence to speak for us, and in that silence, I found something unexpected. Peace. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not just as a mother or as a woman recovering from loss, but as a human being deserving of tenderness. He did not treat the night as a mistake. He did not retreat from me. If anything, he became more thoughtful, helping more, listening more, and offering quiet reassurances with the way he looked at me. We talked late into the evenings, not always about what had happened but about everything that came before it, the loneliness, the silence, the broken dreams we both had been carrying. And slowly, something warm began to grow between us, not just rooted in that one night but in all the unspoken understanding that had led us there. I still did not have all the answers. There was still fear in the back of my mind, whispers of what people might say. But for once, I was not letting that fear decide the shape of my life. What happened between us had not been wrong. It had been honest, and if healing could be found in places we never expected, then maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something we could walk through together.